Morning guys, my name's Jamie.
And I'm Jess.
And today we want to give you a behind the scenes tour of Cosmorac's Coffee. Did you know that Cosmorac's has been roasting coffee in the ACT since 1985? And today we're still one of Australia's leading specialty coffee roasters. If you want to perform at your peak as an athlete, make sure you try Cosmorac's Coffee.
Well, good evening and welcome to this month's Bay Game Online Get Together. I'm Ed Morrison, your host, and this month we're playing a little bit of musical chairs. Well, sort of. You would normally be greeted by Mat Lock, of course, but tonight he's taking up a different position and I am left on introduction duties. Now, I'm pleased to say, though, that Mat and his wife, Neridah, will still be on the show, but in a slightly different capacity. Now, I'm coming to you from Melbourne, Australia, which has made international headlines about its stage 4 restrictions here. And honestly, it's been tough, but we have had what we need for happiness and interactions online with friends and family to keep our spirits high. And evenings like this and projects like these get-togethers have been invaluable. Wherever you are in the world, I hope that those close to you and yourself are doing okay and getting through 2020. Alrighty, now before we meet our guests, I'd like to welcome our audience here within the Zoom room and to everyone watching this right now on our website or on the Facebook page. If you have any questions you'd like to ask either of our guests tonight, just comment under the Facebook live feed and we'll do our best to get them in. Don't be shy, we're live and this is your chance to have a question answered on the spot. Now, of course, the same is true if you're here with us in the Zoom room. Pop your questions in that chat box and you may get to ask our guests directly a question. Now, I thought about giving our guests a very lengthy introduction, and I certainly could with the list of achievements they have. But the whole point of the evening is to hear their stories, so I'll leave them to explain the details throughout the next hour. Our first guest has had a career as a police officer, as a corporate, and now as an entrepreneur in the health and fitness space. And he's touched on each of these, whilst at the same time chalking up a host of athletic accomplishments worldwide that inspires everyday athletes. It's this term, the everyday athlete, that drives a power of work behind a number of exciting projects that this man is currently involved in. I'm, of course, speaking of the director of the Bay Games, Mr. Mat Lock. Mat, how are you this evening?
I am well, thank you, Ed, and that's quite the introduction. I promise I didn't write it. That was all Ed's own work.
I tried to keep it as short as I could, whilst still giving you, still making sure I maintain my job, if that makes sense. Now, Mat, how does it feel to be on the other side of this? I mean, I know you host a podcast. We've done a lot of these get-togethers. How often have you been on the other end of it, answering the questions rather than asking them?
I'm not going to lie, it's different because I'm normally not answering questions about, I don't normally talk about myself in this environment. So, yeah, it's an interesting, it's an opportunity, let's say, to understand how our guests normally feel. So looking forward to it.
Well, I think our audience is certainly looking forward to hearing from you. Now, our next guest, no prizes for guessing now. Our second guest, much like our first, brings multiple skills in multiple careers to the table. A theatre nurse for over 20 years, a masseuse, a personal trainer with a keen passion for prehab and rehab. And not that it's a competition, although maybe it is. If you thought Mat's list of athletic achievements was impressive, wait to hear some of this guest's achievements. Of course, speaking of the co-founder of the Bay Games and the wife of our first guest, Neridah Lock. Neridah, how are you this evening?
Hi, Ed. Thank you. I'm good.
That's good. Now, similar to Mat, I might start off by asking you how it feels to be in this position. Again, you guys are normally the ones trying to architect or put together a show where we're asking other people questions, and now you're about to be put under the microscope for the next 60 minutes. How do you feel being on that side of it?
I'm actually a little bit nervous. I think I make Mat nervous because he never knows what might come out of my mouth.
Yeah, you can never be sure.
So I think he's more nervous than me, although I'm pretty nervous. But I hope I get some good questions, and yeah, it's going to be fun.
Look, as the host, I couldn't be more thrilled to hear that. Please say what you want and take us on the biggest tangent you like, because I think that'd be really interesting. And look, this show's really about getting to know you guys, and I'm really looking forward to our audience who loves the Bay Games and loves the Grand Slam and loves these get-togethers, but potentially doesn't know you guys who have put it all together as well as they should. Now, I'm really looking forward to hearing your stories and the road that you took to get here. My plan is to play this a little bit like one of those movies where we see the very end scene, or maybe even the current scene before we see all the scenes that get us there. So I'm going to start with, I guess, what is the somewhat obvious question, guys. Like, I want you to talk, Matt, I'll start with you. How has 2020 been, and how have you had to adapt or change some plans that you might have had in 2020? And please take that question wherever you like.
Yeah, absolutely. Like everyone, 2020 has impacted us heavily, but that is the same for everyone. But speaking from our perspective, obviously running a business like the Bay Games, running in-person competitions, certainly the physical event in November, as would have been. I guess it's been, honestly, the word I'm going to use is survival mode at the end of the day. I mean, we took the Grand Slam live after 8 months of building into that on the same day that every gym in the Western world shut down for COVID. And as our regular audience knows, we pivoted, there's a word, that's been heavily used by a lot of people this year, but it's true. And as you know, we felt the need to revert to making it a free event just to keep the community connected and moving. And I'm glad we did that. And a lot of people, we had athletes from over 27 countries participate in that. And we had a lot of great feedback about how, for many athletes, that just helped get them through. They were stuck at home, gyms were closed, some had lost their jobs and so on. And it was the Grand Slam that helped get them through. And that warms our hearts at the end of the day, but that's the reason we did it. Of course, the Bay Games, the physical event, is postponed until next year. And we've taken the decision to give everyone something to look forward to and to train for. And therefore we have the unstoppable version of the Bay Games, which will be the same weekend in November. So that, as you can imagine, there's a huge amount of work that goes into that. Albeit we've got, lots of good experience from running the Grand Slam. Nonetheless, it's a different format. And but I have to say, we're pretty excited by it. We're looking forward to it. So that's got us to where we are. And certainly looking into the future, into the immediate future, we've been working on a really exciting project which will go live at the end of this year, an extension of the Bay Games, part of the Bay Games, which will ultimately help us reach more everyday athletes, certainly here in Australia and New Zealand, and in the future around the world as well. So we've been keeping busy, but I think the key word was survival mode.
I'm exhausted just sort of hearing everything that I knew you would have had to confront from that answer. Can I ask you, I know this is quite broad, the role that things like the Grand Slam and the get-togethers have played this year for people, and how much they've given people purpose in a year which has struggled to have purpose. Did you ever think when you started this journey with the Bay Games a few years ago that would be a role that it would play? Did you naturally think it would come into that? Or I'm sure you didn't predict a pandemic as such, but did you see it being as meaningful as it's been this year?
Part of the driving force behind, I guess, the creation of the Bay Games, and the four of us that did that, was because we saw the impact that it had when we ran it as a one-day event three and a half years ago, and we saw the impact it could have and how it lifted people's spirits and the camaraderie and community it created. That was very much the motivation behind it. No, I'd never stopped to consider the depth of the impact it could have, and certainly talking to athletes from the last couple of years, whether it's the physical Bay Games or the Grand Slam, when you hear the words, this has changed my life, you have no idea by how much it's changed my life. And you got, the Grand Slam got me through COVID. That was the only thing I had that was positive in my life. Those hit home, I have to say. That's yep. We hear that and we listen, and that means a lot, I have to say. It's so I couldn't have anticipated that impact, but couldn't be more proud and pleased that that's the reality.
Absolutely, and proud and pleased you should be. Neridah, look, as I did your introduction, our audience would have heard that you're a nurse. So your experience of COVID is, I won't say it's a unique one. There's health workers all around the world and country at the front line, but you're certainly getting a perspective that perhaps myself, Matt, and a number of other people wouldn't get. How was it having that perspective, working in the health sector, and also trying to work on the Bay Games and pivot, like Matt said, at the same time?
Yeah, I guess, you know, I'm no different to any other nurse around the world at the moment. We had to change our practices, and that was sometimes on the fly. So, you know, working 12-hour shifts, being on the intubation team, that was a really big change of working dynamic for me and for a lot of my colleagues as well. But you just had to do it. Everyone around the world's had to do it. So now it seems like it's the norm, and maybe that will be our new norm. But it is what it is. We can't change it. We just, you know, we have to deal with it. And I think everyone has really positively dealt with that, particularly where I work. And as far as the Bay Games, it's just been, as Matt said, trying to still run an event that has meaning for people, and give them an outlet, and to still feel part of the community that we have tried to build over the last couple of years. So I'm really proud of Matt and what he's done this year, and fingers crossed that COVID now decides to go away and we can get back to the real norm of having a physical event, because that's what I love to see. I love, you know, people coming down and, you know, seeing our beautiful little coastal town and making new friends and doing new things. But if it has to be online, it has to be online. We, as Matt said, we have to pivot, but, you know, we're not Robinson Crusoe. Everyone's doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. I hear you. Can I ask, do you guys have been so busy. I know, and we're about to hear how much you love training and how competitive an athlete you guys have been. Have you guys had time to train this year? Have you guys been able to do some training?
Yeah, we train most days.
Yeah, absolutely.
At least once a day. Matt's a bit more freakish than me. He likes to do multiple trainings. But yeah, we're very lucky. We've set up our home gym, and we train at CrossFit JB, and so we're very fortunate that we still have that physical outlet that we can go to somewhere and still see our friends. And you know, we've been lucky enough, unlike yourself and those living in other parts of the world that can't travel. You know, we've been able to see our friends in different parts of the state and train with them. So we've still had that sense of connection, and which has been really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Neridah, I'm going to stay with you for one more question. And this is where I think I'm going to flip the timeline on us a little bit and take us back maybe, I think it's a good, maybe 20 years. I'd say 20 years ago, the health industry, the industry you're in, Neridah, nursing, medicine, that type of industry, there would have been a disconnect between that and the relationship with the fitness industry. And then I think that the understanding has changed that those two things, prevention and cure, they need to work symbiotically for people to improve their health. I guess I just start your journey into PT and things like that. Was that inspired by your work within health or within nursing itself, or how did that transition come about?
Yeah, 20 years ago or 24 years ago, when I left school, I didn't want to be a nurse. I came from a family of nurses, but that wasn't the reason. I always was into sport as a kid. And so the natural progression for me was going into an industry that was sports orientated. So
Sure.
I really wanted to do human movement. And when I didn't get into human movement, I was totally gutted. And nursing was number 6 or 7 on my list. So I thought, well, I've got to go to uni. I've got to study something. So I went to uni and started my first year of nursing. And yes, I could have switched over to human movement or to become a PE teacher, but I didn't. I kind of stuck with it, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed that interaction with the patients. And I stayed with it, obviously, for 24 years. But I've seen some huge changes, like everyone has in the health industry, insofar as what it means to healthy and to lead a healthy lifestyle, and how important fitness is in that.
Yes.
We know, the top 3 preventable illnesses, can be turned around with a good diet and good exercise and vitamin D and, staying connected and having a positive mindset and all those kinds of things. So there's so much research out there, and there's so many really smart people doing some really fantastic stuff around fitness and diet, that we actually don't have an excuse anymore to be an overweight, sedentary lifestyle, group of people anymore. We don't have an excuse, because I think there's so much information and there's so many avenues to take to prevent us from, falling down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, absolutely. There is a lot of people can certainly educate themselves, and ideally resources like, podcasts that Matt runs are where people can educate themselves, as well as the more formal settings. Matt, I can't imagine that your police experience would have had the same link to what you're doing now, but I am more than happy for you to try and correct me if there is a link, or if there was a transition or something that happened in your police career. Talk us through that where how we started there and ended up here.
Well, I think it's fair to say, a bit like Neridah, I hadn't grown up with I'm going to be a policeman. That wasn't how I grew up. I think it's fair to say I didn't shine in the academic world. I enjoyed playing rugby. I enjoyed everything around sport and basically being a little terror, I think my mother would say. And so when I got to the point at the age of about 16, literally it was at school, the career counsellor said, well, what are you going to do? And one of the options they put forward was that you could, the police. And I hadn't really thought about it, but for some reason that piqued my interest, and off we went. It really was born from, I don't know what I want to do. I wanted to be a vet, but I was never, ever going to get the results I needed to go to university and be a vet. Ability aside, I was never going to do that. That just wasn't me. Anyway, so I joined the police. I literally went into the police at 16 and a half and did 6 years. So, they're very formative years, and I became very streetwise very quickly, much to my parents' dismay, I have to say. I guess they didn't want their youngest son to be in some of the environments that I was at those tender ages. They saw it. But anyway, nonetheless, I loved it, I have to say. I really don't regret it. However, I became quite battle-hardened and cynical far too early, let's say. And thankfully, my father sat me down and had that conversation. Made me look at the big picture and think about what else the world had to offer. And so, I really enjoyed the police, and I enjoyed that sense of camaraderie. I mean, I know it gets bandied around a lot, and we use that term, when we talk about the Bay Games, and it's not marketing hype, it's true. And for me, it harks back to my time in the police, and I still have a handful of exceptionally good friends that were from the police days, and that's a long time ago now. And it's that special kind of bond, which for sure in the medical world as well, emergency services, military, in all sorts of environments, that you get that special bond created. And for me, I know the power of that, and I attach a huge amount of value to that. And that's why I appreciate we have the chance to recreate it in the community that we're a part of now.
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of communities where you can learn about, that camaraderie you're right, it's potentially a word that gets talked about a lot, but it's certainly one that when it's in its purest form, it's great to map it over from one community to the next. Can I ask you about your love for training? And we're going to go through some of your ultra distance endurance accolades in a moment. Did the police force assist with that love for training? Like, was there a real sort of idea of, keeping in good physical shape while you're in the police force, or was that something that you were doing on your own personal time?
Back then, I hope there is now. I have to say no, there was nothing. So, thankfully, I was that way inclined. I'd grown up playing rugby, running, swimming. I used to do tetrathlon Because I had a pretty nice upbringing. My parents were both.
You've got to tell us what triathlon is. Sorry, because I couldn't get Word to accept it as a word, so I need you to explain it to me.
Well, I know I mean, you can tell my nerd face. So all right, here we go. And I'm not ashamed of this. I'm proud of this. I grew up, I was very much part of the Pony Club, and I understand what I'm doing now when I unleash that knowledge. But nonetheless, I was part of the Pony Club, and I have to say, fantastic years. And when any of my friends these days would remind me of that with their tongue in their cheek, I'd just remind them about Pony Club camp that usually had about 100 kids going to it, 2 of which were boys, and I was one of the boys. So Pony Club, absolutely game on, brilliant fun. But the triathlon was part of that, and it involved air pistol target shooting, swimming, pool swimming, cross-country running, and horse riding. It was actually cross-country jumping. So I was doing that at the age of sort of 10 through maybe even 9 through 14. So really, what a buzz, absolutely brilliant. And certainly I've always had that athletic sort of competitive streak in me. I've never really, it wasn't until I discovered the ultra stuff that I realized actually where my strengths lay. And I've always been a bit more competitive with myself. And, my parents would talk about, even as a kid, I just had that sort of gritty determination. If I remember years ago, Dad sort of made the comment about cycling somewhere from A to B, and he said, he'd get there. He might not want to come back, but he'd get there. Like, there's no question that. But so I've always had that, but the police certainly didn't provide that. On the contrary, the police was a period of my life that there was lots of warm, flat beer in the UK, lots of curries, and I have to say, quite a few cigarettes as well. So back then I went through a phase of being quite heavy. And drinking beer and smoking, and that was very much the culture, I have to say, which I hope that's changed now in the more modern world.
Yeah, I would think so, but I guess that was a while ago, and I think it's probably, look, it's worth me asking now. We may as well move on to it. What was the thing that took you into that ultra endurance world? Because you've got a resume. You're a 9-time Ironman finisher, 3rd place in the Ultraman Canada. You're the current record holder for the 101K race in Singapore, and you've actually done the race across America twice. Or you've been a podium finisher twice. When did this ride into the ultra world start? Like, what was the thing that tipped you into it?
Yeah, sure. So I left the police. I went to Canada and spent a couple of years. That was my introduction into the commercial world, I guess, outside of government. So I lived and worked in Canada for a couple of years, then moved back with the same company to the UK, and that's what led me to Australia, actually. I had originally, we're both sort of second marriage, and so with my first wife, we sort of moved around the world, and so, which, as I say, brought me to Australia. Things didn't work out, unfortunately. Our relationship ran its course, and that was the catalyst. As soon as I became a single person for the first time in my adult life, because we were together 20 odd years, childhood sweethearts and all of that, right. The old me kind of kicked in, and I started enjoying the beers, and I got back on the durries and so on. And that really annoyed me, I have to say. It really annoyed me, because I'd stopped smoking for about 10 years at that point. And I basically had that conversation. And I certainly wasn't on the brink of being an alcoholic. There was none of that. There was no low point, but I just know me. I've got a pretty addictive personality. And I knew that I needed to make a decision. Do I want to go down the path I was, or do something differently? And actually, I got roped into doing a little baby triathlon here in Huskisson, where we're sitting at the moment, run by Elite Energy. Absolutely brilliant. Emo, who shout out to Emo, who owns and runs Elite Energy. He put on, he probably doesn't know that he was part of the turning point, actually. But we did a
We got a question from Emo for you, which I'm waiting to.
Okay. Oh, brilliant. Okay.
So I got a feeling you might know, but go on. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, well, so that sort of small triathlon, which is designed to give it a go. I'd never done a triathlon before. A whole bunch of us did it, hungover, in the spirit of what I'm talking about. And, it absolutely broke me in half. And we're talking here, it was like a 300-meter swim. I don't know, it could have been a 7K bike ride and a 2K run or something. And it just snapped me in half. And I was battered over the finish line, and I loved it. And it made me realize where I was at physically. and I saw an opportunity, and me being me, long story short, about 3 weeks later, I'd signed up for an Ironman in Western Australia 9 months later, knowing through fear that I would train like a demon for it, and that would lead to the lifestyle changes that I was actually looking for. So that was how I got into it. And I trained for my first Ironman and just loved it. I loved the routine. Ned said already, training twice a day. I love the training, I think, even more than the competing, if I'm honest. I love the routine, the structure, the discipline, the everything around it. But that's how that was my introduction into the endurance world.
That's a really interesting, and Ned, I was planning to ask, and I will ask you next about how you entered a similar world, but that's a really interesting point, Matt, that you just made. And I think I'd like to touch on it quickly. That idea of liking training more than competing, and I am really jumping the script here, but do you think that's a common thing for the everyday athlete and for people at the moment? Like this idea of falling in love more with the process of training rather than having to feel like there's a end game goal or like a competition day they have to work towards?
I think so for many, yeah. Having spoken to many everyday athletes that we're in touch with, at the end of the day, yes, I think it's it gives purpose, having the goal. There's an end purpose to the training right now. So it might be I'm training for the next 6 months for an event, but in reality, what that means is I'm part of a community each day. I get to, it's almost giving yourself permission, therefore, to train for that hour or that 90 minutes or more. I mean, for the longer events, longer training. Mm-hmm. But nonetheless, I think so, yes. It's also, I mean, for many, and I hadn't necessarily realized it for myself at the time, but the whole mental well-being, of course, that connection, the conversation, the community, all of those words that we use a lot of because they're true. Yep. It's absolutely true. And so I think mental health, mental well-being, more than I had realized. And so, yes is the answer. But for many people, I think a lot of people enjoy games day, game day, let's call it. No question. And I do. But actually, it's the lifestyle changes that come to bear from the consistency of the schedule each week, whatever that looks like for each individual. That's where the power comes from.
The reason I asked you is that I really get the sense that the events that you run, like the Bay Games and the Grand Slam, that they're as much about inspiring people to train for those things as they are about competition day themselves. Is that a fair comment?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even in the last 2 weeks, we had a conversation with a number of everyday athletes who said, "Oh, I've signed up this year. I watched last year, loved it, saw that actually, why not? I can do this too." And they've signed up this year, and it was a similar story the year before. And that for us is a testament to having built that. That's what it's for. At the end of the day, as you know, there's no qualifier for our events.
Yes,
all ages, all abilities, all are welcome, and that's true. And so to have people come and watch their mates, cheer their mates on, and then think, I fancy a crack at this, and then train for the next year, learn new skills, be part of that now sort of micro community that are training all for the same event, and they get together on Sundays and it's a special training event, and all of that. I think there's a magic in that that pulls people closer together.
Absolutely. Now we're jumping around here, but we're always going to. Sorry, Ned. I need to ask you. I'd be really interested to know how you found that world, because I'll touch on it in a moment. But you've got a very impressive resume as well when it comes to endurance accomplishments. How did you find that world?
I got into triathlon very late in my life. I spent my very young years being a swimmer and quite competitively, and then moving into netball, which I loved, both of them very much. I don't play netball anymore. I blew out both my knees and had to have them reconstructed. And so that was never going to be on the cards, which is a shame because I really love netball. So swimming was my background. And when I moved to Sydney from Melbourne, I lived with a girl who was just kind of in the same boat as me, really. And we decided that we would try out these small little triathlons around town. And I, like Matt, entered one of Mo's triathlons down in Nowra, and I remember walking from the car to the start line with my bike, with a cigarette hanging out my mouth, walking through transition.
True story.
You know, and having all these people look at me and me thinking, well, what are you looking at? You know, this is who I am. This is what I do. So I remember it was brutal because I didn't train for it really. But that was my kind of, I guess, start of that triathlon kind of phase that I went through. And then having met Matt, I guess that was something that we had in common. By then I'd done a couple more triathlons, and kind of a stepping stone was the half Ironmans and then the full Ironman. So I kind of took more of that latter approach, where this freak just went from, you know, doing something that is entry level to going into Ironman. That's just cray. But I did it, I think, the more acceptable way that most people would take that route. And then triathlon.
I'm not surprised that Matt took that route, by the way, just so we're clear.
Yeah. And then after triathlon, I guess the part that I enjoyed most, and most people would have said swimming, which I did enjoy swimming, but was the bike, which really surprised me. So I kind of shifted gear, pardon the pun, and went into cycling and got into ultra distance cycling. So when we lived in Singapore, we both were really lucky that we had developed some really good relationships with expats that lived there, and we rode with ANZA, and then we joined the Singapore Audax group. So we got to train in Malaysia, and these great big rides that we do, 2, 4, 600 Ks, 1200 Ks. And so that was, I guess, the route that I took then was into cycling. Sure. And then RAM came along, and then the Silver State 508.
Which, of course, we'll need to explain.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some of those achievements. And I'll be honest, I'm a little bit overwhelmed with where to start. And again, coming from an honest place, I'm somebody who hasn't been that exposed to the endurance world. So when I look at these achievements, I understand what they are, but I also think perhaps I need a little bit more of an explanation to know exactly what I'm in for. I'm going to start with a question from Mo, because I think he probably knows the more crazy stuff you guys have done. Yeah. And he said something very nice, actually. I'll read it verbatim. He said, "We all look at these two passionate legends in the CrossFit world, but ask them about their incredible efforts with RAM, RAAM, and the Norseman." So you talk to me. Matt, you're up first. Talk to me about RAM or Norseman, and Neridah, I'll get you to explain the other one.
Well, actually, yeah, no, I'm happy to kick it off, but let's start with the Norseman, which actually relates entirely with Ned. But the Norseman is an iron distance event, so it's the same distance as an Ironman. Right. So 3.8K swim, 180K bike ride, and a marathon. However, the Norseman is considered to be one of the most brutal versions of that on the planet, literally, and takes place in Norway, hence the name Norseman. And you start with the swim by jumping off the back of quite a large boat, not a ship technically, but it's big, a big ferry thing, into the dark, freezing cold waters of the fjord. So you swim towards the fire on the shore, you get out, and you start what is an epic but brutal bike ride, 180 kilometers. It starts with a steep climb out. It's mountains, proper mountains. And the weather was just horrific. It was sunny to start with. So everyone was all kind of covered up and wearing all the hot stuff. And of course, the cold weather gear, and just got smashed on the climb out. Anyway, long story short, and then for sure, then it's a run, a marathon, the first half of which is on the flat, beautiful and scenic by the lake. And then the other half is like that. And I have to say, kudos to Ned. It's by invitation only. And Ned secured an invitation. She was the only person to represent Australia that year, and finished. Many don't finish that event, let me tell you. We were crewing, and it was absolutely amazing. And to see someone who, when I met Ned, was doing, as you say, small triathlons, to then, do you think I could do a half Ironman? Yeah, of course you could, absolutely. And we got through that, and then to Ironman Cairns was your first fall, wasn't it? Yeah. To end up to then see her doing Norseman was just incredible, because there's very few people on the planet get the chance to do Norseman.
Ned, does Norseman rank as the hardest?
Yeah.
Right, it does. Is that daylight? Is there anything close to it?
No, probably Swiss Man or something similar, those Nordic triathlons. But it's a bucket list event to do. So, anyone that's listening who wants to do a bucket list triathlon of iron distance, throw your hat into the ring. As Matt said, it's
going to Norway's on my bucket list, if that counts. But
yeah, you should.
Maybe not the Norseman.
Well, while you're there. No, it was extraordinary. And it is by invitation when I say that. It's a lotto. So thousands of people apply to Norseman every year. And then they choose, very few to actually jump off the back of that ferry. And it's epic. It's just one of those, I cannot believe, I got a lotto spot.
Yep.
And a lot of my friends who lived in Singapore had tried to get a Norseman spot year after year. And the first year I threw my hat into the ring, I was lucky enough to get pulled out. It's extraordinary and tough. It's really brutal. And really, I'm really thankful that Matt, obviously was there, but you can have somebody running with you for that period where you actually, you go up the mountain. So, we were, I think at one stage I was holding onto the back of Matt's shorts and he was kind of dragging me up the hill, and, it's 18 hours plus it took me to do that. It was horrendous, but, I got the T-shirt. It was all good.
And that's the point. The finishers get a T-shirt, that's it.
Yeah.
But what a T-shirt to get. But I have to say, on the bike for that one, there were times it was sheeting, almost hail, but but literally wearing wetsuit gloves on the bike, it was just miserable.
And I remember a few times they would stop at the side of the road, and I would, I'd see them thinking, I'll just stop and I'll have something to eat or whatever. The weather was so bad that they wouldn't even get out of the car. And later I found out that Matt said, I told them not to get out of the car because that would mean that you'd stop, and then it would be harder for you to get back on the bike. And it was right, absolutely right. At the time, I use a lot of expletives, as many people who know me would attest to me actually doing.
You've done well so far tonight then.
Yeah. And, I was, damn you. But it was a blessing in disguise, really. But it's a fantastic event.
Matt, can I ask you then, Matt, if Norseman, Ned, for you is the pinnacle? Matt, it's not
the iron distance events. Yeah, probably. Sure. I guess for me though, what I am most proud of is RAM, I think.
Okay, well, talk to me about RAM, because that's the second part of Emo's question.
Sure. So RAAM, Race Across America. It's an endurance bike race.
And you guys have finished on the podium twice, haven't you?
Yeah, that's right. So we've done it twice, and we finished on the podium twice in teams. Wow. There are lots of people, well, there's a handful of people each year that do it solo. And I have to say, having done it as a team twice, I can't imagine doing that solo. I mean, real kudos to anyone who's has done it or considering doing it solo. But what it is, you race from the west to the east coast of America. So you ride straight across the middle of America, basically. Start in Southern California, in Oceanside, and you end up in Annapolis. And it's nonstop. So the clock starts, and you're then living in a bubble as you traverse your way across the country. And we were told before we did the first year, we had a lot of great help from people who've done it before, amazing support.
Sure.
And we were told you'll get to the point quite quickly where it's just light or dark. It won't actually really register. You just light and dark. And that's exactly that was exactly how it was. I'd say within 36 hours, you were kind of, okay, everyone's hunkered down. So 4 riders, 13 crew, 3 vehicles, non-stop moving, just making their way. The way we did it was to break the team of 4 riders into 2 teams of 2. So you'd always have One team of two would be always kind of going ahead in one vehicle, eating, recovering, trying to sleep, while the other two would then share their shift, one riding at a time. We were doing it 20 minutes. You change 20 minutes, 20 minutes, 20 minutes, and you do that for 4 hours. And you'd get to a point around 4 hours, you'd find the other two. You'd then try and get some food down your neck, try and get some sleep, while the other pair do that. And quite quickly, your life becomes about 20-minute shifts. Yeah, basically.
And you're gonna excuse my ignorance, but how long does this event take? Like, what's the finishing time?
Let's say, for argument's sake, it took us 6 days, 10 hours, and some minutes.
That was the second time.
It took
us 7 hours, 15 minutes or something the
7
first
days.
year. 7 days, sorry. 15 minutes the first year, and then we took up a whole day in the second year.
Yeah, lessons learned. Plus, we had some dramas in the first. We had some medical emergencies in the first event. So, I mean, I have to say that was, even though, I mean, I really enjoyed and I'm proud of both times we did it, there's something pretty special about the first time. Because it's a voyage of discovery. And I was always told, a little bit like when you do Ironman, I was told by my coach, Matt, he said, your first is always your most enjoyable.
Sure.
You've got no expectations of yourself. From the second onwards, you're always trying to better the time you've done before. And certainly we went to the second time with the intention of winning. No question about it. We went fully prepped to take top spot. And after, it's a 5,000 kilometer race, and we got pipped to the post in the last 250 Ks. Yeah, I mean, like, it was full on hardcore battle at 250 Ks to go with the other team that eventually won out. But certainly in the first year, we had Ned was unfortunate. We had some roadworks. It was at night, and Ned did had quite a nasty fall. She ate the road and required literally had to go and have 20 odd stitches in her lip, and still today, in fact, the jaw is quite uncomfortable, and so on, and broke some fingers. And
did you get back on the bike in that race, Ned?
Yeah. Wow. After the ketamine wore off.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, my goodness.
Pretty awesome. I mean, Ned was whisked off to hospital, and we then came a 3-person riding team. And fair play to the other two, Sarah and Theo were the other pair that year. And geez, they put some big hours in, and they were on their knees by the time we got back to them. But they, just the way the team pulled together, up until that point, I just wrote about this recently, that had we done a disc profile in a business environment of the crew and the riders, and look at the personalities and so on, and looking for potential problems and conflict, well, we would have been well advised not to start that race. I mean, there were some strong personalities in there, and for sure there was some friction in the first 24 hours. But what was wonderful for me on reflection was how having an incident that changed the dynamic of the whole race for us, which of course involved, there was emotion in there as well. We didn't know how badly Ned was, would she be able to get back on the bike, and all of those things. How well the team just adapted. And this is a team that was not being paid. They did it for a living. None of us did it for a living. We're all different professions coming together. But as soon as we had that common goal, that was, I guess, now laser focused, we all had to adjust. It was amazing how the team came together, and the rest of that race was just incredible. And certainly the friendships and again, those bonds, that camaraderie that were formed during that race will last the test of time. There's no question about it. Quite special.
I actually listen, and believe it or not, even though you're talking about stitches and falling off bikes and being in hospital and ketamine, I actually have an envy to that experience, because I guess I dabbled in this world, but on such a surface level, it barely is worth a mention. And as a functional fitness athlete, we have some things that are difficult, but nothing that probably has an analog to that. So I guess my question that I have for you now is, what turned both of you towards functional fitness? After you had the experiences that you've had, and you've had the achievements, was it just the natural next challenge for you guys, or did it seem like a more healthy way to train? Or I'm interested to hear whichever direction this is going to go in. Matt, perhaps I'll start with you.
Yeah, sure. For me, there was a definite decision for me to adopt this style of training. And that was because I did I had a go at it in Singapore, and it made me realize how fragile I was as an athlete. Right. Holistically, I'd become strong on a bike, running, and swimming. I've become pretty good at those three things. And I did a bit of core work. So, reasonably good core, which is necessary, obviously, for long, sitting on the bike for a long time or running for a long time and so on. But nonetheless, it was interesting how I felt exposed. Sure. It made me realize how I had neglected any sort of holistic approach to my fitness and well-being. And, I'm 46, and I'm conscious that, I wasn't doing any load-bearing kind of exercises. My mobility was shocking. Stretch? I don't think so. I had the tightest hamstrings in the world.
Stretch? Oh, stretch.
Yeah, it's a weird concept.
But so that for me was, very much about a conscious decision. Plus, I really enjoyed it. All the new skills to be learned, around the Olympic lifting, the gymnastics, so much stuff to learn and improve at and so on. So for me, it opened up a whole new world of that. And as well, I'm just, I was and remain determined to simply get fitter and stronger as I age, and basically try and enjoy an amazing quality of life for as long as possible.
Yep, absolutely. And Neridah, was it a similar epiphany or what?
No. We moved back from Singapore, and having spent every day riding my bike with like-minded people and being quite good on the bike, to coming back to nothing. So I really lost the mojo completely. I went for a few rides when we moved back here, and they were just a bit boring. Sure. It was, I'm not enjoying this at all. There wasn't that, camaraderie, the banter of riding, the shared pain, the same shared successes. It just wasn't there anymore.
Yeah, I understand.
For me. And so I hung the bike up and literally have not been on it for close to 3 years.
Yeah, wow.
So for me, it was, okay, what am I going to do? So I joined the gym and really liked that, as Matt said, that just moving in a different direction, as, doing triathlon, you move in one direction and it's always forward. Whether that's running or riding or swimming, you are moving in one direction and one direction only, unless you go off course, But that for me was, I guess, one of the reasons why I enjoyed the gym so much was because you got to move in so many different ways. And learning new skills, as Matt said, it's been fantastic. I'm not going to set the world on fire with my functional fitness prowess, but I do like challenging myself, and I do like the little wins that I have. That's, that's good. It's that's what keeps me going every day, is that, I set a new PR for myself, or but similarly, what I do enjoy very much is enjoying the success of others. And I think I've always been of that mindset. I video my friends. I get excited when they do a big lift. I scream and give them a high five or a virtual high five. So that I really love that. And I think that's what I love about the CrossFit gym that we go to, is such a great little community, is that, we all share in that same success.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, that's how I got into it.
Now, I've asked you guys a lot about your athletic careers, and I think everything you're saying is telling me a lot about who you guys are and why you are where you are with the Bay Games. But throughout this story in the background, Matt, I know that there was a transition from the corporate world to doing what you're doing now. And I just wanted to touch briefly on what the turning point was, if there was one, and maybe just give our audience an idea of timeline along that. Like, did that happen while you were still doing triathlons, or did that happen after you found functional fitness? I'd love just to know that side of the story a little bit more.
Yeah, sure. I worked in corporate for over 2 decades, and in fact, for the last decade was with one company. And I have to say, they're a brilliant employer, great company, family-owned German company, and they do a great job. And I was on a good package and all of those things. And it was quite a surprise to a number of people when I said, you know what, I'm pulling the pin, I'm done, because I was in a good position. But for me, it had lost, for me personally, I'd kind of lost, it had no soul. The actual job I was doing, I didn't really see, no longer had the sense of purpose from it. And it all sounds a bit cliche really, but I knew I had more to offer. I wanted to have more direct impact on the world, and within the little bubble that I'm in, let's say, my part of the world. And I just realized that traveling, as I was extensively, over 6 months a year away from home, when you add it all up, that wasn't going to be sustainable anyway, and it wasn't really serving me, and it wasn't serving me to the core. So I simply made the decision to step out of corporate, move back. We moved back to Australia, and that was pretty much like Ned talked about. The infrastructure that we had available to us in Singapore was amazing for the races that we were doing and the training that it required. We had, some really awesome friends, and you can see in Ned's face, there were really awesome friends that were just literally in the year where we did Race Across America for the second time, and that was the same year that I did Ultraman Canada. And I remember Jeff, who was running Audax at the time, he just said, look, it's not, it wasn't a sort of a big year for Audax. It's every other year, I think they do that. And he said, on that basis, what's your training schedule like for your races? Because we'll just factor in the entire program for the first 3/4 of the year around what you need. I mean, how awesome is that?
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing. And so, all those 200, 300, 400K rides, they were just all basically centered around what we needed, which, so when we moved back, Jervis Bay is amazing and it's beautiful. And I know there's a lot of active triathletes here, and for competitions, it's I'd say the best place in the world. Especially as I know Emma.
No bias.
And Emma's watching. No, but it's true. I mean, it's the most amazing backdrop to host events like triathlons. But for me, for the regular training, I got used to such high volumes. It just kind of, I didn't have that bug so much anymore, yet was falling into the functional fitness world and loved that. So certainly, then for sure the Bay Games came to be. That wasn't part of the plan while I left corporate, but and I didn't really have a plan. And there was a plan for sure. We've got some holiday rental properties and so on. The bills have to be paid, and that was part of the plan. But the Bay Games wasn't on the radar at that point, and that really did just come to be. And it was the right time, the right place, the right people, the right everything, the right location for sure. And I sometimes smile at how it's just evolved and blossomed, and also knowing where we're planning to take it.
I'd like to ask, was there a moment with the Bay? I mean, stuff like that, always there has to be a, yep, we're gonna do this, or I'm not too sure, or no, I'm over the line now. When was that moment with the Bay Games? When did that happen?
Well, the Bay Games was born. There was myself and Ned and Dale and Shelby, so it was the four of us that founded originally, and we went and watched the CrossFit that were then regionals, and probably will be again, but they were still regionals back then, 2017, I guess, in Wollongong, where I'm guessing it's the first time we heard your voice.
Yes, I would have been emceeing the floor that you get, no doubt.
There's a great story behind that too, Will.
Well, that was the next year.
For
the first year was when we literally, I guess we watched this amazing event, and it was the regionals. It was packed. Had some big names there. Tia was there. Cara was there. There were lots of big athletes there, big named athletes, and big audience. And the atmosphere was just amazing. And we all sat there, sort of going, "Wow, what an event!" And you could see how the energy and the atmosphere was lifting the athletes and their performance. And yeah, we were just basically, how cool is this? And Ned just, it was the funniest thing now looking back. Ned just said, yeah, how cool is this? We should run something like this for, for non-elite athletes.
Yeah.
We should do something. I said, oh, that's, right, oh, that's a good idea. And she said, oh, we could call it the Bay Games. And I remember we all kind of looked at each other and went,
this is happening.
Dale and I in particular looked at him and went, you know what, let's do it. That sounds amazing. Let's give it a go.
That was good, because I'll come up with the idea, but I had no idea how to actually do it.
That's fine. You can't have everyone do the details. You've got to be the big picture person then. So
But it wasn't that, I don't think it was the first year that we went there. It might have been the second year that we saw Ed there.
Oh, that's right.
Commentating.
No, he was there both years. But I guess we were in the mode of
2018.
So we ran it, one day event, realized again after that, like, yeah, okay, there's an appetite for this. And we enjoyed it, and everyone seemed to enjoy it. And so, we kind of stepped it up, formed a company, and it became a 2-day event. And for sure, it was starting to gain momentum. And then for sure, we came and watched the regionals again.
And we heard your dulcet tones out on the floor, and Matt was possessed. He was like, we need to get this guy.
Whoever that is.
Who is that? We need to get this guy. We need to get this guy. And we had a friend who had a activewear label at the time, and she had a store.
I remember receiving the email saying, "Hey,"
and she was like, "Yeah, I know it. And I'll hook you up." And Matt was like, oh.
Well, it was kind of funny because the reason we mentioned it to her was we're saying, oh, like, have you got a pass? Can we get downstairs?
He was determined.
I was going to pass a note to you. I didn't have to go. And when she said, oh, why? What do you want to do? And I said, oh, I want to get a message to the contest. Oh, that's Ed. That's Ed and Kobe. No problem. That's easy. I'll just email them. So, yeah, brilliant. Small world.
He was thinking about jumping the railing and running down the stairs, and I've got a note for you, Ed.
God, I always dreamed of people jumping railings for me at concerts, but maybe not. That's not how I expected it to go down.
They're not the kind of streaker you're looking for.
No, not necessarily.
But it was a very it was
meant to be.
Yeah, it was meant to be. He pointed at you and said, "We need him."
Now, hold on. This isn't meant to be about me, and I've still got more questions. I've only got you for another 3 minutes, so I need to ask you guys something quickly. And, perhaps on a more serious note and a nice note to close on, I know you guys have worked really closely with the Are You OK organization, and I know it's something that you guys are super passionate about. And we talked earlier, one of the first questions I asked you was, did you see the Bay Games and the Grand Slam in particular, becoming as meaningful as it has been to people? Do you want to just talk about how that relationship with Are You OK has developed, and sort of what work we've seen you do and might see you do in the future with that group?
Absolutely. We're very proud to support Are You OK? And I think COVID in particular has made it even more commonplace to talk about the fact for many people, going to the gym, training, being part of a box or a studio, whatever it is very much a part of their mental well-being, their mental hygiene almost.
Yep.
And that was very obvious to us anyway. So in terms of the Bay Games audience, obviously it's something that's close to many people's hearts. But as well, like most people, we have either had touches ourselves with mental illness, or that could be with ourselves or with friends, and certainly that's true for us. We lost a very dear friend. How old was Dean?
Mid-20s.
Yeah, mid-20s. When he took his life, and that was 2 or 3 years ago. That brings it home, the reality of the importance of making sure the right support is in place for people who are struggling with mental illness or have suicidal thoughts or anything around, anything in their darkest hour, to do what we can. And Are You OK is brilliant. One of the things I love about Are You OK is the fact they're all about awareness, about talking and helping to have the conversation. And that's so important. So that certainly has helped drive that relationship with Are You OK? But it is relevant for our audience, the Bay Games audience, as it is for us. Most people we know, anyone knows, I think, knows someone who has either suffering with mental illness or knows someone who has maybe taken their life or tried to. And there's six Australians a day, I think it is,
I read
take
that
their life, and
before
30 more tried.
Attempts, yeah.
And you know, that's significant, and that's just Australia. So actually, one thing I'm happy to talk about now is we've been in discussions recently, and it's a done deal, where we'll continue to support Are You OK, which is all about raising awareness, but we actually want to have even more meaningful impact, let's say, and therefore we'll shortly be officially announcing in a couple of weeks that we'll also be supporting Lifeline Australia. And when I support, I mean financially, and we'll do that in a number of ways, but one of them, of course, is a percentage of revenue from registration, but there's other ways we're going to do it as well, and actually fund the calls and be able to say, well, we as a community this year have funded this many calls. And it's not to say, you know, let's say it's 500, and it's not to say that every single one of those is saving a life, but you know, some of them are.
Yep.
And that for us is just a way of having an even deeper impact. So we sort of copied at the front end in terms of Are You OK and raise awareness, but also for people really in their darkest hour when they pick up that, you know, dial that number and receive the help from volunteers, that they get what they need as well. So really very proud to be associated with Lifeline Australia as well, and they're an amazing organisation. And talking to them over in recent weeks, the impact that COVID has had on their call rate, it is 30% increase in calls since March. So that's certainly very important for us, and I think it's very important for many people who are associated with the Bay Games.
Absolutely, and guys, I think it's appropriate. We're quite pressed for time, but to finish on that note, because I know that you guys are doing much more than just putting together exercise competitions. That type of work, I think, is so meaningful, and it really is on behalf of the community, the Bay Games community, the functional fitness community. We are lucky to have you guys doing that work and supporting Are You OK and Lifeline. I will for the last time. The floor is yours, guys. Is there anything that you'd like to say to our audience that perhaps I haven't prodded you correctly to talk about?
I would. I'd like to give a shout out to all of our supporters who, you know, has been on this wild ride for 3 years with us. We've made some amazing friends through this thing that we have, and I'm really blessed to call these people my friends. They're amazing individuals. Some of whom have fantastic stories themselves, and just the people you meet along the way, and the people that we've helped, and hopefully that continues. But just the people that support us, you know, we put on an events, and you know, we hope people enjoy them, but we get just as much enjoyment and fulfillment with the relationships that have been built from the Bay Games. So I'd like to.
You guys make a lot of people happy, and I can see that through the comments on the chat that are coming through now. So this has been an enlightening chat. Matt, any last thoughts for our audience before I wrap this thing up for us?
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, I echo what Ned has said, but as well, I'd like to acknowledge the team that are around us, and there is an extensive team reaching around the world, actually, and they're often not seen directly, but you know, from yourself, Ed, I mean, you've been obviously doing.
I'm being seen right now, so I'm.
You are absolutely. You've been doing it tough in Melbourne. Jim and Mick's behind Undefined Media, who are pushing buttons as we speak. Often don't make it onto the screen, but you know, they've been incredibly supportive in what is commercially a very tough year for anyone in the events business. The same is true with Will Henke, head of programming, Alethea Boone, our head judge. I'm not going to keep naming because I'm saying, you know, we've got as well, we've got Monica in Portugal, we've got Pat locally, we've got Ray locally, and there's more. Renee, Pete, got to mention you guys, and as well, you know, Emma's watching now. I know he is, and Late Energy have been a great supporter of the Bay Games and of us personally, and continue to do so. And it all really matters, and it helps. You know, IT Basecamp, who have taken care of us with the website and everything we do around, you know, the streaming as well. It wouldn't work without all of those people involved. And in what has been a very tough year for everyone, I've been blown away with just the level of commitment and support to the brand and to us. So thank you to everyone. And of course, thank you to all of our everyday athletes around the world for being awesome. And can't wait to play some more, I have to say. We've got Unstoppable coming up. We're going to try and put on a show for sure. And obviously we hope to resume back to normal with our in-person events, and we've got other stuff coming up as well. So thank you to everyone involved. You are amazing.
Well, thank you so much, guys, for a great discussion. And I'll wrap this up, team, by saying that at the Bay Games, we understand that too well that exercise and human connection are natural antidotes to depression. And the team feel a sense of responsibility to keep building this global community of like-minded souls and to contribute directly to those frontline services that support people in their darkest hour. And it's great to hear that Mat and Neridah are supporting Are You OK and Lifeline as well. Now, with that said, thanks so much for tuning in, and thank you to our broadcast partner, Cosmorex Coffee, and of course to our beautiful guests, Mat and Ned. Until next time, be brave, have fun, and lead by example. Bye for now.